because of this doubling, tripling, quadrupling of the intensity, it can be perceived as quite a mind-blowing intensity when the Kundalini snake wakes up and raises its hood, rises and ascends up along the spine.
Action!
What is Kundalini? This fundamental life force cultivated in the Kundalini Yoga, celebrated by ancient and modern yogis as the Kundalini Shakti, the fundamental life force that amplifies our ability to manifest our dreams and that fuels our spiritual awakening. This Kundalini is regularly depicted with the symbol of a snake. This is where it got its nickname from, the serpent power. The symbolism is that of a cobra snake, which in the auspicious moment rises up vertically, flares up, broadens its neck, its hood, and expresses, unfolds its heroic momentum. So the serpent power, Kundalini Shakti, the symbolism of the snake, the cobra rising, to describe one of the common ways in which Kundalini can be experienced, that is via the rising of energies from the lower chakras up along the spine towards the higher chakras. So this is the classical standard, which has been described in many ancient scriptures and that has been cultivated and practiced for centuries, actually for several millennia already. So this practices which help the rising, the ascent of the fundamental life force, come under various themes in different traditions, but in the yogic context of India, they come under the headline of Kundalini Shakti and practices that are originally rooted in classical Hatha Yoga. So all the physical yoga practices, most of the asanas, the pranayama, breathwork exercises, and related purification techniques, all of what we call in our modern studio world yoga, all the posture-based practice of the modern times, is classically rooted in traditional Hatha Yoga, which started around, roughly speaking, 1,000 years ago. A bit more than that, actually. And we find it represented in famous scriptures such as the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, or Hatha Pradipika, the light on this Hatha Yoga practice, authored in this case by Svatmarama. And we find in these scriptures the descriptions of preparation via purification, cleansing the physical body, but also cleansing the energy channels, the so-called nadis, known in the Far Eastern tradition also as meridians. So cleansing and purifying the physical body, the prana energy channels, also releasing some stagnant emotions and subconscious weirdness from our emotionally charged mind, realigning our intellect and rational thinking, and even purifying our karma. So a lot of purification done as preparation to then successfully practice, after the purification, the asana, posture-based practice, and then to learn also the yogic breath work, the pranayama, bringing a rhythm to the prana, the life force. And in this way, we amplify the flow of the etheric energy in our body. The yogis apply advanced tools such as mudras and bandhas and combine them in an eloquent way. All of that to prepare for this mentioned rising of the Kundalini energy. So all of the preparation is done to cleanse the body so Kundalini energy can rise up along the spine from the lower to the higher chakras. And that is not the final purpose, but this rising of Kundalini energy is known to be, in the Hatha Yoga tradition, almost a prerequisite for altered states of consciousness. And these altered states of consciousness are not really about just going on a ride for the flashy, fancy experience, not for the kaleidoscopic I was there picture and had this stunning kind of blow my mind away, colorful, energetic spectrum of flashiness, not really just for the show off and stunt of it, but the classical Hatha and Kundalini Yoga also have as their main purpose the spiritual awakening. So all of it is just a preparation for the spiritual liberation. What is actually mentioned in that classical scripture, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is basically a manual for activating Kundalini, what is mentioned in the beginning in 2-3 very clear verses and statements, Svatmarama says, this Kundalini Hatha Yoga thing is just a preparation, a stepping stone for the advanced level of Raja Yoga, the royal superb path, which in this context can be associated also with the Mantra Yoga, Laya Yoga, and other advanced forms of meditative, contemplative practices. So the Hatha Yoga cleanses and prepares the body for the rising of Kundalini. The Kundalini induces altered states of consciousness, and all of that prepares us to then practice the superb royal forms of Raja Yoga, which is Mantra Yoga, Laya Yoga, a sense of dissolution, dissolving all dualities in oneness, and other contemplative, meditative practices to connect to the consciousness of oneness, to the supreme absolute spiritual essence of being. So this is, in a nutshell, the historic roots of Kundalini Yoga. When you, in the modern times, meet Kundalini Yoga as a headline in social media, in some ad, on some poster, flyer, somebody talking about Kundalini Yoga, in almost all cases, more than 80%, maybe even more than 90% of the mentions of Kundalini Yoga in the modern Western yoga world are actually referring to a specific brand of yoga, a specific variation, unique style of this Hatha Yoga, Kundalini Yoga, which was founded by an Indian teacher called Yogi Bhajan. He's coming from a somewhat known religion known as Sikhism. The Sikh religion, you will encounter them usually wearing turbans on their head. Not the Arabic Muslim type of turbans, but the Indian tightly wrapped turbans usually associated with the Sikh religion. They have some overlaps with Hinduism and the warrior caste, the Kshatriyas, these very committed and noble, honorable beings, which in this case gave the source for Yogi Bhajan to develop his globally famous, popularized version of Kundalini Yoga under his 3HO organization. So they became world famous. This specific style, this specific brand of yoga has probably tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of followers around the world. Super widespread, super popular, super intense in the practice and in the results. Very flashy, very, in a way, compelling in its charge of energetic momentum, produced a lot also via strong breathing exercises, various forms of hyperventilating, coming under practices such as the breath of fire, the Bhastrika pranayama, but other variations of a lot of actually endurance, of keeping the arms up or to the side for extended periods of time, combining that with strong breathing practices, holding of the breath, engaging some of the bandhas. So these are some of the common practices done in Kundalini Yoga in classes of that style. But generally, if you go deeper on that path, they do also a lot of purification and cleansing of all aspects of our being. Many of my friends have been practicing or are teachers in that lineage of Yogi Bhajan's Kundalini Yoga. Frequently very pure-hearted, genuine beings, very sincere seekers, dedicated to their practice, and the very pure lifestyle, the refined and uplifting intentions. So generally very candid and authentic approach. About the original sources of Yogi Bhajan's Kundalini Yoga, there have been many debates. If he also came up with some of these practices himself and invented them, or if he drew also from some of the oral transmission in his lineage from his teachers. That's a certain mystery. Nobody exactly knows the original sources and roots of this Yogi Bhajan type of practices. What I can say from my perspective, having explored a lot the ancient scriptures and studied with masters who are very directly aligned to those scriptures, that surprisingly Yogi Bhajan does not include many of those classical practices from the scriptures in their classical description as provided in these old books. If that's a good sign or a bad sign, I don't know. Just there is a certain contrast between the popularized Yogi Bhajan version of Kundalini Yoga and the ancient classical traditional forms of Kundalini Yoga coming from the scriptures around 500 to 1200 years ago. So that's in a nutshell the context. Just to put things in perspective, that's why I spent some time on the topic, because as mentioned, when you discover in the Western world Kundalini Yoga, it's most probably related to Yogi Bhajan. That is important to be aware of. I give you one other very influential Western source, which is indirectly related. You find it in a book called The Psychology of Kundalini Yoga, authored by Carl Jung. Carl Gustav Jung, Swiss, German, Austrian lineage of psychology, psychotherapy. Carl Jung was actually a student of the famous Sigmund Freud, who is the founder of psychoanalysis, the famous dream analysis, one of the most influential masters of Western psychology, who gave a foundational understanding to the subconscious, the iceberg metaphor, 90% of our mind being under the surface in the subconscious basement of the iceberg. So that's Sigmund Freud's legacy of psychoanalysis. And his student Carl Jung actually went, inspired by the Oriental tradition, to India. And he discovered there a lot of the classical practices of the asanas and also the chakra energy work. And coming back from this India travel, he actually gave in Switzerland a lecture series where he spoke about the Indian psychology and the energetic mechanisms that he discovered in his basic approach. Carl Gustav Jung was not an proper advanced yogi and practitioner of all of these things. He was more like a psychological enthusiast coming from his Western mindset. And he gave this lecture series in Switzerland. I forgot the exact year, in the 1920s or 1930s. And that afterwards was published in this influential book, The Psychology of Kundalini Yoga. Why am I mentioning this specific author and book? Because he is one of the sources of our Western understanding of the chakras and of this westernized approach of the ancient Indian wisdom tradition, where actually in the classical scriptures from the Indian subcontinent, we do find, of course, mentionings about the chakras, some basics already more than 2,000 years ago, and then 1,000 years ago, more details provided, 500 years ago, here and there, some more details, but actually not much of nuanced, fine-tuned descriptions of the psychology and other elements of the chakras, and definitely nothing really of our modern westernized chakra understanding, where you find descriptions of this crystal belongs to this or that chakra, the rose quartz in this energy center, and the diamond belongs here, and other assumptions such as the essential oils, certain fragrances corresponding to certain energy centers, and a great variety of psychological and emotional attributes ascribed to these energy centers. Basically, all of that is not older than 100 or 150 years. So that is important to be aware of, that this crystal and aromatherapy, essential oils, and most of the psychological interpretation of the chakras is a Western, modern understanding, which basically has barely any roots in the ancient Indian tradition. And I can assure you that I'm not just saying this lightly, but I studied with some of the most eminent Sanskrit scholars in the world, experts in the scripture study, philological researchers who really went very systematically to all the source scriptures, scanned them very thoroughly, and came to that conclusion. So trust me on that one. Which is not to say that the modern understanding is wrong. It's just saying that it's not ancient. So just to claim that it is the ancient Indian wisdom when it's not written anywhere in any scriptures and we don't have any evidence of it, that would be a misleading assumption or statement. So I just for a moment wanted to clean that one up, and mentioning that the Psychology of Kundalini Yoga, this book by Carl Jung, had a strong impact on the following generations of Western enthusiasts, coming with this, in a way, chakra psychology and Kundalini psychology. So much to clear up some of the basic understanding. A bit more on the theoretical side. So it is, of course, for us now time to get more practical and understand more clearly what this Kundalini energy is actually about, to take it out of the realm of theory, assumptions, and source analysis, coming now more back to a practically related perspective on this fundamental life force, the mentioned serpent power. In the beginning of this spirit of yoga exploration, I gave to you that introduction of the snake, the cobra, flaring up. So this rising of the Kundalini energy from the lower to the higher chakras is what I mentioned initially, and we come back to this topic now. So the perspective in some of the Hatha Yoga lineages on Kundalini is that the snake is sleeping. It's a dormant, hibernated, sleeping snake, coiled up, with a metaphor, at the base of the spine, in the root, and it's fast asleep there. And it might have some baseline activity, such as a hibernating animal having like a very slow, sustaining heartbeat. But no, compared to the summertime when the animal is running around and jumping from this area to the next, it's kind of almost completely asleep. And similar, we can say that for the Kundalini energy, in most human beings, this fundamental life force is mostly asleep. An activation level of 1%, let it be 3%. But it's not really active, the Kundalini energy. Its potential is there. It has the possibility, the opportunity to wake up. But for most people throughout their lifetime, it barely ever really wakes up. So this is important to understand, that we all have the potential, we all carry the seed, but for most of us, it doesn't really come to the sprouting, the growing, the flowering of human consciousness, and the fruition, the results of this energetic activation. For most human beings in their lifetime, it's not really happening. So that as a first understanding. And the second important one to clarify is that it is not about an on-off switch. So it's not that we switch it on from the previously sleeping 1% state to switch it on to 100%. It's not a black or white, off or on. It's instead gradual, progressive, and sequential, proportionate level of intensity, meaning we can activate and tune up the dimmer switch, gradually amplify, like the volume knob on an old school radio. You can gradually turn it up. So from 1 to 3% to 5, 7, 11%. That is already a big step, because no, it is double, triple, quadruple than what we are usually navigating in our energetic reality. So because of a tripling, quadrupling of the energetic momentum, it can feel quite intense and quite almost overwhelming. This bursts, these blasts of energy, which might express in certain shivers, shaking, tremors, and different forms of vibrations, physically and energetically in the body, as well as emotionally and psychologically. So because of this doubling, tripling, quadrupling of the intensity, it can be perceived as quite a mind-blowing intensity when the Kundalini snake wakes up and raises its hood, rises and ascends up along the spine, and can then express also in the limbs. A trembling can arise, which might initially feel kind of like so intense, stronger than I've ever experienced anything similar in my life. So then the assumption from the novice would be like, wow, this is it. I've experienced the Kundalini, and intuitively, organically, we would assume kind of like, this is the real deal, full-fledged 100% thing. Yet experience shows that it's not quite the case. It's partial, gradual, in a way nuanced arising of that fundamental life force, which might be, as mentioned, 7, 9, 11%. We have the potential for more and for even more. But it's in a way good that we don't immediately blast with a turbo boost full power into 30, 50, 90%, because it would, in a way, fry our system. It would lead to a complete knockout and system failure, and we would get burned on the over intensity of it. So it's kind of like a protective, it's not a kill switch, but kind of like a valve which doesn't allow for even more, because the tripling, quadrupling of 6, 8, 12% is already a lot. So that's important to see the gradual amplification. With practice, we get used to more. And in this way, we learn to cope better, and we gradually tune in and are able to accept and funnel more intensity of energy. So we purify more, we cleanse, we get ready that our system can handle even more intensity later on. So these are two important factors to understand. That we have the usually dormant state, 1 to 3%, the snake coiled up sleeping at the base of the spine. And then it's not an on or off, but shades of gray, colors of the rainbow. We gradually and even sometimes abruptly turn up the volume, the intensity, but it usually is very much in a sequential, step by step, getting used to more process. Good. So that as some practical, technical explanation how the energy flow can amplify. I mentioned that this description of the Kundalini being based at the root of the spine, rising up the central channel, is only one of the perspectives. So we do find also in many ancient scriptures references to the Kundalini energy starting at the level of the heart. So the Chit, H-R-I-D, Chit, is the heart center. And we find references to Kundalini energy like the fire of the heart being set on fire, and then also here a rising of energies from the heart through the head towards the crown, the Sahasrara, the 1,000-petaled lotus is the literal translation of Sahasrara, the crown chakra. So the energy rising from the heart to the crown, piercing to what's known as Brahmarandra, is on top of the head, an energetic opening, where Sushumna Nadi, the central energy channel, exits the physical plane of the top of the skull. And then we have an energetic structure above the head, this crown chakra in itself, like a halo, a ring of light, an energetic field above the head. And then we find additional mentions also of even higher points of energy above the head. So we find references in sculptures, for example, in the context of Theravada Buddhism. That's a form of mindfulness practices and advanced spiritual awakening path in Southeast Asia, where we have the most famous practice known as Vipassana, going directly back to Siddhartha Gautama Buddha. So these awareness-based practices of the Southeast Asian Buddhism come under the headline of Theravada Buddhism, based on the ancient Buddhist scriptures known as the Pali Canon. Anyhow, in that lineage, you find in Southeast Asia statues of the Buddha with a cone-shaped head. You might have seen those golden Buddha statues, which don't have like this flat human head, normal, but they have like a pearled cone head on top, very pointy. And this can be seen as a symbolism for the experience of energetic centers, energetic structures above the head. In the yogic Indian tradition, we find references in scriptures to a point known as the Dvada Shanta, X finger breaths above the head, and all types of nuanced descriptions of these advanced energetic structures which the yogis have been accessing. either through the energy rising from the heart center towards the crown and above, or also the Hatha yogis with their rising of the Kundalini energy from the root chakra, Muladhara, at the base of the spine, up along the spine through the crown in the ideal scenario. So, different approaches to this rising of Kundalini. It's important for you to see that there is not just a one and only approach, but different variations. So, that being said, maybe one last additional mention to make related to the classical Hatha Yoga Kundalini practices, that we are having the description of the 3 energy channels. There's the just mentioned Sushumna Nadi. Sushumna is the central energy channel running more or less parallel to the spinal cord. That's the central one. And then we have Ida and Pingala Nadi. The left feminine receptive side, Ida, and Pingala, the masculine controlling channel on the right side of the body. In some pictures, intertwining, rising all 3 up along the spine, left and right, and the central channel. Usually the energies flow predominantly either left or right, alternating. And what the yogis try to do is harmonize and balance, for example, with the alternate nostril breathing, and have the energy flowing in the central channel, Sushumna Nadi. And then the experience shows that the energy can get blocked on certain levels, that it doesn't rise all the way up towards the crown. So there are blockages in different areas, and the yogis described those as knots. Tying a knot, the energy channel is blocked like if you have a water hose, it's plugged by kind of being twisted up. A knot in the hose doesn't allow the water to flow through. So the yogis called these knots grantis. So these are energetic blockages along the energy channels rising. And the yogis have techniques to release your blockages so that the energy can flow freely and rise up along the spine. Also, this is done via purification techniques, as mentioned previously. So that, in a nutshell, some of the highlights of the Kundalini Yoga approaches. I've been practicing these advanced techniques for many, many years, having lived in Asia for almost 20 years, practicing with some of the grandmasters in India, in Thailand, in Bali, and beyond. I am pretty well versed with these practices after decades of being immersed in the field. So it is, of course, mostly about the practice and not about the theory. But for the purpose of this session, we focused on some of the historical context, the modern brand of Kundalini Yoga related to the Yogi Bhajan Sikh lineages. And I gave you some context of the ancient Hatha Yoga scriptures, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, light on Hatha Yoga with all its purification, posture practice, the pranayama breathwork, the mudras and bandhas as they are cultivated in the advanced Kundalini practices. And I shared with you some other details about the chakra psychology and the energetic chakra anatomy, the subtle anatomy of the energy channels, the left and right channel, the central channel for the fundamental life force rising up along the spine from the base to the crown, and also other options with this fire of the heart, having this sense of elevation and uplifted energies leading to altered states of consciousness, which ultimately will lead to the spiritual liberation, going beyond all the troubles of this world, beyond the duality of pleasure and pain, and residing in the consciousness of oneness in this yogic state of bliss. And I'm very much looking forward to actually explore the practice with you sooner or later in some of the advanced courses of our Yoga Academy. We'll dive into the direct experience of this Kundalini Yoga. We occasionally offer these Kundalini awakening retreats, for example, in India, in the North Indian yoga capital, Rishikesh, at the shores, the white sand banks of the turquoise Ganga River, which is coming from the glaciers of the Himalayas, where we practice there in some serene surroundings in the spiritual motherland of yoga. So sooner or later, we'll welcome you in wonderful Asia so we can actually sit together and experience those benefits and these altered states of consciousness together. For now, I'm just sending you loving wishes from wonderful Bali straight into your open heart. May the serpent power rise in your being. May we come to spiritual liberation in this lifetime. I'm sending you much love and full blessings. Keep on shining. Thank you so much. And very curious how we can go deeper together.